Sup nerds? Hajimemashite, watashi wa Andrew desu. E oggi facciamo un Kickstarter preview di un gioco che si chiama Sarah's Singularity. It's a time traveling game about alternate timelines, moving people around from era to era, and jumping from parallel reality to parallel reality. This one's going up on Kickstarter quite soon. You might want to keep an eye out because, well, things might get a little weird. Hey man, like I said, Sarah's Singularity, man, it's a pretty groovy game. It's about time-traveling adventurer, and she's moving through these groovy eras of history, all the way from prehistory to the rock revivals. And what she's doing, she's moving around, she's bringing people to and fro, man. It's groovy adventure. And all along the way, she's trying to do these missions that are righteous, score points. That's awesome. But like I said before, it's a Kickstarter preview, man. So let's get that sweet, sweet Kickstarter preview alarm running.
Wee-oo, 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 wee.
Doesn't that just hit the spot? £5. I didn't even know they made them this small. Well, whatever. Here's the way the game works, nerds. Basically, everybody's going to be Sarah. That's right. Every single one of you is named Sarah. You're a different kind of Sarah. And that sounds super, super lame. But it's not. It's awesome. Because each Sarah has her own powers, right? And so the idea is that all these Sarahs are running around these different time eras. And they're trying to solve these missions. And you got to think of these time eras like machines at the gym, right? What happens when you want to go work out on your hamstrings or whatever, and one of your gym bros is on there? What do, right? You can't both use the machine at the same time. That's crazy. So what do? Well, that's sort of one of the cruxes of the games. There can only be one Sarah reasonably per time period. That's not true, by the way. More than one Sarah can be in a place at a time. Except at the beginning of the round, everybody is going to reveal what era they're headed to. And each of these eras has a different mission that you're trying to accomplish, and it has different allies that are in that era, and you can move allies to and from eras in order to get those companions to help you accomplish your goals. But if more than one player ends up in the same era, because everybody sort of announces blind where they're headed without really knowing what anybody else is going to do, you get what's called a paradox. And a paradox, well, that's one of the coolest things about Sarah's Singularity. Everybody who's involved in the paradox is going to turn in their Sarah card. They all get shuffled with the Sarah deck, and then everybody gets a new Sarah, meaning ogni volta che questo succede c'è la possibilità che tu non sei la Sarah che era tu al principio. Look, the important thing to remember, whatever, is that Sarahs basically can't do anything by themselves. And so what they do is they end up either rescuing people from time periods and then bringing them to other time periods, or moving people around or whatever. And those companions are the ones that are really going to do all the work anyway. Because each of the missions requires a certain combination of symbols, and the companions give those symbols. I mean, some of the Sarahs have powers that let them manipulate symbols on companions, and some of them have powers that let them move companions around more easily, or steal companions, or whatever. I don't know what the obsession is with being with other people. But basically, the goal of the game is to bounce around and finish missions, and those missions are worth points. And if you have the most points at the end of 7 rounds, you win, or whatever. Oh boy, let me tell you, this game can be quite a hoot. The fact is that it's simple and light. The decisions are fairly uncomplicated. At the top of the turn, you're basically choosing which of these time eras you're going to rustle on over to, and then you're just deciding what it is that you're going to do. And the only way that your plans can be led astray is if one of those darn varmint other Sarahs end up dropping in onto the era that you're headed to, causing yourself a bit of a paradox. Of course, there's also Sarah Prime, who's not a player at all. She just bounces around, acts as a little bit of chaos in a game that's already saturated with the stuff. But honestly, that's no big deal. The fact is, you're going to be done with this game probably inside of 20 minutes, 30 on the outside. Plays pretty quick as long as folk sort of grab onto the core concepts and start running with them. And that's Sarah's Singularity in a nutshell. Basically, what we have here is a simple set collection, set completion game with this really, really cool theme. And like I said, all you're really doing is every turn you're picking which area you're headed to, resolving paradoxes if you have to, and then either adding some companions or maybe rescuing some companions, all in the name of getting the necessary icons in an era to complete that era's mission and score its points. You only have 7 rounds, so that's a pretty short game, and honestly we milled through it pretty quickly at basically every player count. There is a lot going on here that we really, really appreciated. First of all, I think the theme is phenomenal. Like, the idea of everybody being a different version of this one character, and every version of that character having unique power, that's so cool. We love the whole paradox thing, where you bump into yourself, and of course that creates like this rift in time, and you get shuffled around, and a new person, a new you, comes out, and that's really neat. The characters, the companions, the art is great. There are all these like sort of interesting kind of untold proto-stories of like, who are these characters and what are they doing and how do they help you. There's a lot that's unsaid that is interesting. All that said, we did have a couple of little things that bugged us just a little bit. First of all, we don't really mind if a game is multiplayer solitaire for the most part. Like, that's just not a thing that troubles us. We like games where I work on my pile of points, you work on your pile of points, and at the end of the game we compare piles. This is not that. It's also not a take-that game. Not really. But where you rub into other players, you can't really interact in a way that is beneficial to you. Every time you interact with another player, usually the most you can hope for is to kind of maybe ruin their next action. Like if you both end up in the same era, and you end up going first because of the way the turn-breaking rules work, then maybe you hope to set it up so that you just make sure that they can't score, or that you get to that mission card before they do. Ultimately, it's a little difficult for there to be any sort of interaction that ends up being in your favor. It's not a take-that game, like I said, but sometimes it can feel just a little weird. The other players are just obstacles to be avoided rather than really sort of an interesting part of the game. The other thing about it that is a sort of your mileage may vary criticism is that we wished that the chaos of the paradoxes was either less or more. We felt like they didn't quite, like, the time travel thing, the parallel, not really parallel dimensions, parallel timelines, alternate versions of Sarah, is far and away our favorite part of the game. And this idea that when you bump into each other, you sort of like explode into a temporal paradox and a new you comes out, as I said, we think that's friggin' awesome. And we hope that during the course of the Kickstarter they manage to add a whole bunch more Sarahs with a whole bunch more powers, so that that kind of ups the power and significance of that moment. But the way the game is structured, you only experience paradox after you've committed to which time period you're going to. Which means, first of all, you don't know what anybody else is going to do. At best, you're guessing, which is cool. We like that. But at the same time, what it means is that you might lose your Sarah power if someone else goes to the same time period you do. You might keep it, because all the cards go back into the deck and they shuffle, so you might actually get your old Sarah back. But you will likely lose your power, which means that at best you kind of build your plans most of the time not really taking your Sarah power into consideration. Or at least that's what we ended up doing. Because it was easy to lose, unpredictable when it happened, and getting stranded in a time period, because you can only affect the time period you're in on that turn. Getting stranded in a time period without what you thought you were going to be able to do, you end up having fairly limited options for how you spend the rest of that turn, and there are precious few turns. So, ironically, we wish that they had upped the ante more. We wish that if you were going to have this element of the game, it should be kind of the centerpiece of the game as far as we were concerned. It added a good bit of fun, but it could have turned a good game into just like a brilliant game. I'm not a game designer, so I'm not smart enough to tell anybody what could have been. Only that I wish they had just like run in with both arms and embraced this paradox concept. That all said, Sarah's Singularity is an interesting, fun, light game. It plays better with a couple of extra players. We played it at 2, the minimum, and we didn't find it nearly as satisfying. It felt like there were fewer paradoxes, even though you play with less time periods when you're playing with less players. So the game does sort of constrain you, and there is always Sarah Prime, who will also trigger paradoxes, even if you don't bump into another player. But all that said, we had a good time with it, and we think it's a good game, and we think that with just a little bit of like fine-tuning or some throwing some more love at it somewhere, this could be like a great game. That really is all that there is to say as far as we're concerned. It's good, it's worth checking out. Daily Magic does great production, so we're sure that it's going to look phenomenal. This prototype art was already great. We had some standees and stuff that will get upgraded, I'm sure, as the Kickstarter crushes its goals. And beyond that, we think that Sarah's Singularity is something that is probably worth your time, that you should definitely go check out. I'm Andrew from Gameosity. We'll see you next game.
Hey there! Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, give us a like and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next game.